All right, hello everybody. My name is Richard Sharp. I'm in marketing for Human Synergistics, and I am here today for an event I'm extraordinarily excited about. I've got with us today in our first, we're kicking off something called Culture Change Conversations. Got two of the most talented guys in the culture and HR thought leadership game, and Michael Kern and Andy Kimball. And um, what we're trying to do today is sort of start developing a conversational community of practice around the worthwhile pursuit of transforming culture for the better. I wanted to start out by introducing the ever so talented Andy Kimball. Andy's the CEO of Cube Learning and a very close friend and partner of the Human Synergistics world. Um, Andy leads a team of strategic advisors who support orgs building high performance cultures. So this idea of leadership culture and performance being linked is his bread and butter. Andy's the kind of guy that works with Fortune 500 companies, anywhere from American Airlines and Apple to Pixar and the National Defense University. So super wide swath of industries. And um, previous to that, and kind of how I think one of the ways that we came across Andy. Um, Andy was the uh, chief performance officer at Clear Choice. In 2014, he was part of a PE-backed executive leadership team that grew revenue from 125 million to more than $1 billion, and led Clear Choice through two successful transitions, um, largely using culture as the tip of the spear. So, really looking forward to Andy talking about that and sharing some of his expertise. Um, in addition, we've got Michael Kern. Michael's on the leadership team here at HS. He consults with organizations on teams to build constructive workplace culture. So a lot of the stuff that HS does with all clients, Michael is the guy that's leading the effort. Before he was at HS, Michael was a senior HR leadership leader for a number of organizations, from early stage startups to global enterprises. So uh, he's been both the consultant and the internal guy. And if I'm not mistaken, Michael, you and Andy have worked together in the past.
It's been a while, but yeah, actually, this was something I was really excited about to get back together with Andy. Most of my time has been as an HR leader in my career, and during part of that time, I engaged in a culture development initiative programs with my organization, and brought Andy in to my organization to work with my leadership team. And we went through a couple days session with Andy to see how we could lead the leadership team through transformation of the organization. So it's been exciting. That was a few years ago, and it's been exciting to get back together with him.
Andy, I'm gonna ask you to introduce yourself a little bit beyond what I've said. But first off, what's with the Groucho Marx nose with no mustache, man?
Well, yeah, I had a little procedure on my nose yesterday. I had forgotten that it was the day before I'm supposed to be on this webinar. So it's my wife tells me that I look like the poster child for the incognito glasses and mustache. All I need is that mustache here.
Yeah, that's great. You're no less brilliant with a bandage on your nose. So we'll take your brilliance in whatever shape we can get it. One thing I wanted to highlight is you all should have access to the chat. The webinar chat is wide open, and you should be able to ask questions as we go through, make comments. Uh, Um, if Michael made the great suggestion that maybe we could ask everyone here where you're dialing in from. So if you're dialing in from somewhere, the more exotic, the better. If we could get in Iceland, we'd be really, really happy about that. So the weirder the better. But yeah, so I guess I'm gonna go to you, Michael. How did
Oh,
we?
Australia.
Oh, there we
Good
go.
day or good night.
Nice.
Right.
Ooh, the witch city of Salem. We're excited about that as well. Trinidad, Tobago, and exotic Palatine. Well, we really are bringing in people from all over the world that
And
are.
Chattanooga of the choo-choo fame here.
There you go. There you go. Well, terrific. As always, I think one of the best places we could start is, excuse me, with the why for this discussion. Why are we here today? Michael, what are your thoughts? What started this conversation and why are we having it?
Well, I think one of the things I think we wanted to do is have kind of an informal discussion and just have engage with the community that we have joining us here and just have an opportunity to have some back and forth on topics that are of interest regarding culture, and how we get buy-in within organizations for culture engagement and development projects, and working with the different types of people that are involved in that. Well, Andy and I both come from both the consultant side of things as well as the leadership inside side of things, and there are different challenges that we each face in trying to get the buy-in for projects involving culture. So we thought it'd be good to have a conversation about that and get everyone's perspective on how we can be more effective with that too.
Great. Andy, one of the topics that we discussed, I think I actually just met you for the first time maybe 6, 8 weeks ago. And we had a really great discussion about how often leaders within our companies who aren't necessarily part of the HR function, aren't part of learning and development, aren't focused necessarily on culture. They tend to think of culture as like kind of a squishy, soft investment and don't understand, how it can really informed impact. So one of the concepts you talk about is this leadership, culture, performance link, and it makes a ton of sense to me. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. And by the way, thank you for inviting me on here. What a pleasure to be with a community of practice of people, professionals that are working in the culture arena. Not just obviously you and Michael, but the audience as well. So thank you all for being here and joining this community of practice. Culture is anything but soft. It's anything but easy. As we all know, anybody that's worked in the culture world, um, one of the things that we do know, and there have been study after study about this, not just at Human Synergistics, but Harvard, Yale, UCLA, Duke, UC San Diego, there's been a lot of research that suggests that culture precedes performance. If you want to change your performance, if you want to change your results, if you want to get more consistent results, then you need to change your culture. You need to get a more consistent culture. And nothing has more impact on culture than leadership. So if you want to change your culture, you need to get your leadership to behave differently. So culture precedes performance, but good leadership precedes good, consistent culture. And that's an equation that more and more we're seeing. I come from the banking world. We're seeing banks, we're seeing private equity firms, we're seeing the money that are going into organizations slowly begin to understand that they cannot get the results that they want from an organization consistently. They cannot get the valuations that they want from organizations if they do not shore up the culture and if they do not get the leadership to model the way in building that culture. So it's a critical equation.
Michael, you and Andy have actually you've actually worked together in kind of a previous life, using HS projects, but before you started working directly with HS.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I brought Andy, and to work with my leadership team. And that was part of an ongoing effort to address things that were going on with my company in the industry, to change actually the strategy of the company, which we needed to do because of disruption within our industry. And that meant what I found is that we needed to reshape the culture to support the strategy. And so that's the other part of the overall equation, I think, too. Andy mentioned, and as you mentioned, Andy, the chief performance officer position that you're in, or you were in, is something where culture was important for supporting that. Culture is also important for supporting the strategy, and so that's where we needed the leadership to understand how they were going to contribute to shaping the culture, and Andy helped us with that. And that would support the strategy as well. So there's, the famous quote of Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what I take that to mean is that it needs to support the strategy. And if it doesn't, then the strategy will not be effective. So that's the other part. And that's where Andy came in to help us directly with the leadership team.
Yeah.
From your perspective, Michael, like how do you know what are some of those like visual signs that you need to do real work on culture that's really kind of that are kind of the flags that result in you bringing in people to take on some of this work?
Well, from my perspective, I have a very distinct memory of the visual sign that I needed to work on our culture. And I'll give a little bit of background on my company. When I joined the company that Andy came in to help us, where he came in to help us. When I joined the company, the CEO told me in the interview that I had with him that we were a commodity business and we needed to become a consulting business, and that's where the industry was going. So there was a lot of change that we needed to implement. And one of the things that we did when I started with the company was we implemented a mentor program, because we needed new talent for this consulting business. And we needed to develop that talent. And when in the mentor program, we went through a culture survey of the mentors and the proteges. And so graphically, I could see a difference between how the mentors saw the culture and how the proteges, these new consultants, saw the culture. And it was not positive on the side of the proteges. So because we needed those people to develop and become the engine of the organization, we needed to address that within the organization so that we could address the disruption that was happening in the industry. And that continued on to a full engagement on surveying the entire organization. What did the culture look like? What did our climate look like within the company? And how is the leadership impacting that? Leadership impact is actually a tool that we used, and Andy helped us working through that with the leadership team. So there was a lot of things tied together to help us become the company that we emerged to become, which was a very successful local company in the Chicago area to become a global player, doing multi-billion-dollar projects worldwide. And each piece was integral to how we achieved that.
Gotcha. Andy, so from your side of that story, you're on the consulting side and you're bringing in these instruments. What was your experience in driving cultural change?
When you ask the question, kind of what are some of the red flags that culture may be a challenge, to me, the biggest red flag is the extent to which people are experiencing fear, Richard. The more fear that we have in a culture, to use the human synergistics terminology, the more red and green ink that we see in a culture, um, the more likely you're going to see turnover. You're going to see lagging behind against performance goals. You're going to see virtually every KPI in an organization heading in the wrong direction, or just seeing a sinusoidal revenue curve where you have no consistency in results. We know that results come from behaviors, and we know that behaviors come from knowledge, skills, attitude. And we know that by definition, individuals have attitude, but when you put individuals together into a group, now they have culture. So attitudes can be defined in terms of passions and fears. What do we want more of? That's what passion is. What do we want less of? That's what fear is. What drives us away? That's fear. What pulls us forward like a magnet? That's passion. So when you put people together that have passion and fear, now you have this complex interplay of people's passions and fears adding up to this team, department, company culture. And so, as Michael's talking, about, gee, the people coming into the organization had very different understandings of a role or an objective than the mentors. Ultimately, that's a culture problem. How the terminology we use, how we think about our goals, how we think about our markets, how we think about our customers, how we think about our jobs, those end up being influenced by the culture. Do we see, one example, not so much the example that Michael's talking about, but one example I've seen in many organizations is in the sales culture. Do the salespeople see their customers, their clients, their patients as prey, and they see themselves as predator? That's a cultural issue. Do they see themselves as being blood-sucking vampires, wolves of Wall Street, hail fellow, well met, slap them on the back, drink them under the table, manipulative salespeople, and are they proud of those manipulations? Or do they see themselves as value-added, trusted advisors that are there to sit on the same table as the customer, the client, or the patient, and figure out how to solve the problem in front of them? Those are mindset issues. And when you start talking about mindset issues, you're talking about culture. And so ultimately, I think all culture is about shifting mindsets, the individual level, the team level, the departmental level, the group level. In organizational mindsets, do we have a mindset of ELOC or ILOC, external locus of control, internal locus of control? Do we have a mindset of, hey, it's not my job, I'm just the victim of everybody else around here? Or do we have a mindset of ownership and accountability? When we start using words like that, ownership, accountability, victimhood, now we're talking about culture issues, and culture issues that can eat away at an organization like cancer. So I think ultimately that's why culture impacts performance so quickly, because culture is the composite of all the mindsets in the organization, how we think about the organization, our position in the market, our relationship with each other, our relationship with the customers. Ultimately, that's what culture does. Either it makes us look forward to coming in the morning and releasing this intrinsic energy and motivation, or we get up in the morning and say, oh my God, can I go back to sleep? How long can I put off coming into this company? And that can be measured, that can be predicted, and that can be changed, if we can identify what specifically are the root causes of these cultural issues.
A great question from David Bracken in the audience. And I think you touched on a little bit there, Andy. So I'll go to Michael to get his take. A big focus of this discussion is how do we really define culture? We talked ahead of time about how it's often thought of as this kind of squishy, touchy-feely, non-financial sort of metric. But how do you define culture, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Andy just mentioned, I think, you use the word mindset, and a lot of what we think about in terms of culture is what's in our minds. What are our expectations? What are the expectations for the organization, for how we're approaching our work, how we're solving problems in the organization, how we're interacting with our colleagues in the organization. So all of those expectations are part of what becomes the culture, how we shape the culture. Externally, I mean, there's the values. The values become, what we put on the wall sometimes, and sometimes carry with us in a little card of what the values of the organization are. That can be part of it, but it's also if those aren't the leadership models, what the expectations are for that we feel for how we're approaching our work, then they're actually not necessarily part of the culture. They're on the wall. So it's a lot of different things, but a lot of things that are internal to the members of the organization and kind of under the surface. There's the iceberg image of what you see in the culture for how we view culture with a lot of the iceberg underneath. I think Ed Schein used a image of a lily pad or a lily pond, where you see the lilies on the pond, lily pads on the pond, but a lot of the culture is what's going on underneath.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the things that are in our minds that are those expectations and beliefs that we bring to work.
Got a good quote here from uh, Janice Brathwaite, who's saying, "Culture is the foundation of an organization created brick by brick. When a culture is going south, that indicates that the foundation has cracks, and those are the cracks that human synergistics assessments bring to light."
Yeah.
Great synopsis. Annie, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, and I love it. Thank you, Janice. It's a great image, and I agree completely with it. The one thing I would add to what Janice said, and also what Michael was saying, I'm thinking back to Edgar Schein. You mentioned Ed Schein, and I remember reading one of Edgar Schein's monographs where he was talking about culture being what employees experience as being rewarded and punished in an organization. If they experience, they're the behaviors, the traits, what we think is going to get me more of what I want. But it's also what I'm afraid of is going to get me the consequences that I don't want. And I remember Schein once saying that when you think about culture, um, culture is what people do when nobody's looking. And I think Ed had mentioned that at one point that he described culture as the vision, purpose, values that are on the wall that Michael mentioned. Those are like the description of the hamburger in a menu at a restaurant, but it's not the hamburger. And a lot of companies think, oh, we've got vision, we've got purpose, we've got values. We spent a lot of time getting that stuff up on the wall. That's just putting the menu together. The question is, what does the hamburger actually taste like? And I think that to me, when Janice mentions you got to build this up brick by brick, culture is what people actually experience. And either it's something they want more of, that's more of the blue ink passion driven culture, or it's something they run away from. We've got high attrition. You can bet it's a cultural issue. People don't leave bad companies, they leave bad cultures. And bad cultures come from ineffective leaders. And so it's those tendrils under the lily pad. You're absolutely right, in the pond.
Great. Well, Andy, I want to pivot here quickly to an actual to get a little less theoretical and a little less two all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese. But first, I want to. We're gonna. This is the first time we've with this group has done one of these. So I'm gonna go ahead and try. We are going to attempt the Highwire act of launching a poll with some questions about culture. So here we go. We are going to. Are you, Michael and Andy? I'm seeing
Yeah,
you.
I see it.
You
I
see
see
it?
the poll.
All right, we've got the questions. We've got two questions. You do not have to answer it immediately, but we'll have it up throughout the event. One is, which part of driving cultural change do you find to be the most challenging? And then the other one is, what's your best tip for communicating the impact of cultural transformation? Um, we're not going to go resell these. We promise your best tips, but we will probably use them next time we try to take on some of these projects. I will share the results of these after the webinar, and we'll also be sending you the recording of this conversation just for your record. So, Andy, maybe if we want to dig into to one of the case studies that you're kind of that you explained to me that I was really excited about, where cultural transformation project that you engaged in that was really a big financial win and was really tied to overall performance in a way that was massive. And with it, when you described this to me at first, it was just a story that we don't hear enough of in the news, in the business press, is how the change in culture can actually really move mountains, economically speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to give you a little bit of background, before getting into this project at ClearChoice, I had been working with my wife. We've had a consulting firm, QB International, where we worked with companies around the world and helping them to build high-performing cultures. That's where we got introduced to Human Synergistics. We used the Human Synergistics tools to measure culture, measure leadership, and we've been working with the tools for 40 years now, so it's been a while. But in most of the projects, when I was a consultant, Richard and Michael, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. When you're a consultant, most of the projects are relatively limited and they're relatively kind of targeted, tactical. There might be a project to assess the leadership, or there might be a project to develop leadership skills, or there might be a project to develop management skills, or just to give us a sense of come in and do an audit of the culture. But in this particular instance, I was invited in to join ClearChoice by a colleague, a client that I'd worked with for many years, Kevin Mosier, who was the CEO of ClearChoice at the time. Kevin had been the North American president at Nobel Biocare for a while, and we'd gone into Nobel. And at Nobel Biocare, Kevin, not only did we work with Nobel to help develop their sales force and help develop their leadership team, but Kevin had kind of this brilliant idea at the time, which is a rising tide lifts all boats. And he said, what if we use these cultural best practices, these leadership best practices, these sales team best practices to teach our customers, the dental organizations that Nobel was selling implants to? What if we taught them these best practices? A rising tide lifts all boats. If they become more successful, well, Nobel would sell more implants, crowns, and bridges. So Kevin actually sent me and my team around the world to use leadership impact assessments, OCIs, organizational culture inventories, to measure the cultures and the leadership of different doctors and different practice leaders in dental organizations around the world. I mean, here in North America, in Asia, and Africa, and Europe quite a bit. We compiled a good deal of data about what do the most successful dental practice cultures look like, defining success in terms of production, revenue, turnover, EBITDA, all the usual KPIs you would use to measure performance. And no kidding, we found that the most successful dental practices looked a lot like the most successful Fortune 500 companies or Global 1000 companies. The most successful dental practice leaders looked a lot like Ed Catmull at Pixar, one of the best leaders in the country, or look an awful lot like the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And so later on, when Kevin moved from Nobel Biocare to ClearChoice, when he got there in 2014 or 2013, was right about 6 months away from bankruptcy. Private equity company had come in, they put another CEO in place. That other CEO miscalculated, how the ClearChoice, which was a large dental support organization, how it went to market. They had about 6 months of capital left. Kevin came in and quickly identified that the problem there was a cultural problem. The private equity firm had been looking at it as a clinical problem, an operational problem, a commercial problem, but Kevin came in and said, you know what, this is a cultural problem. We need to get somebody in here who can help us measure the culture, figure out where we are, where we want to go, and then build a roadmap, a framework for how to get from where we are to where we want to go. So literally the first thing we did at ClearChoice, here we were 6 months away from bankruptcy. We did an LI. Of all of the doctor leaders in the organization. The ClearChoice was a group of dental practices that sold very high value fixed arch prostheses. So we measured all the leaders, the dental practice leaders. Then we used an OCI to measure the organizational culture. And using that, we then went out and did a forensic analysis of each of the centers to really get a sense of what were the root causes of the cultural problems we were finding. My role over there, I was called the Chief Performance Officer because we knew that performance came from culture. So it was my job to develop a strategy for how do we improve the leadership? How do we improve the way we interact with customers? And that was a very interesting choice I think we made. We looked at culture not just as internal, having an internal aspect, which is how the employees experience the organization. We also looked at it as having an external aspect. How do the patients, how do our customers, how do our clients experience the organization? And I think that's one of the mistakes that organizations often make is they treat their sales forces or their customer support forces as separate from their internal culture forces. And in my experience, there isn't a paper's width of difference between them. If we treat our patients, our customers, our clients the same way we treat our employees, if we treat our employees the same way we treat our customers, our clients, our patients, we're going to have a great internal and external culture. And I think that's one of the things that we learned, Richard, was, and I know Michael and I have talked about this before, was that good culture comes from good leaders. Good leaders are simply good people. There's nothing magic about it. There are no tricks, there are no techniques, there are no shortcuts. If you have high functioning human beings that are talking to your employees, that are engaging with your employees, and you've got high functioning employees who are selling for you, who are communicating, whether in the call center or customer support or face to face with your customers. If you're building passion with those groups as opposed to building fear, you will have culture. And what we found that the net result of all that was the leadership initiatives, the sales force initiatives, the internal culture building initiatives. It took us about 18 months to really begin to see traction. But by 2017, we sold the company the first time around for about close to $500 million. By 2020, in the midst of COVID, we continued these culture initiatives. And when COVID hit, we realized what what we all know to be true, that culture, like evolution, is a survival of the most adaptive. And so those blue ink, highly adaptive 11, 2 o'clock cultures tended to not just survive COVID, they thrived. And we certainly did. The best year we ever had was during COVID. We sold the company for $1 billion at the end of 2020.
And where did it started?
What's that?
And where did the money start? Where were you in the beginning?
We were in the beginning, our private equity firm was about to lose the $44 million investment that they had made in when they bought ClearChoice. And they thought, boy, this is going down the tubes. That's when they brought Kevin Mosier in. And then Kevin brought me and others on the leadership team who were some of the smartest, most effective, high functioning human beings I've ever seen. Some real blue ink 11, 2 o'clocks on that team.
That does not sound like squishy transformation to me.
Not at all. And I will say this, that one of the first steps that we took was Kevin set the pace. Kevin modeled the way. And he made it clear that he expected all of his executives, his ELT, his executive leadership team, to be modeling the vision, purpose, and values. They weren't just words on the wall. They weren't just the words on a menu, that we were expected to model the way of the culture that we wanted to create. And there was a lot of conversation. Every weekly leadership team meeting began with culture.
Yeah, so that leads to a great question from Jody Beeler. She says, can you share a bit about the work you've done to establish leadership expectations that align to an organization's culture? Obviously, the work, Michael and Andy, that you do as consultants only goes so far if you don't have true sort of leadership buy-in. So how do you go about building that and setting the right expectations?
Well, I first of all, it's not for the faint of heart. It's kind of like planting a garden. You can get the seeds in pretty quickly, but then it takes a lifetime for that garden to grow and continue to grow and to nurture it and really turn it into what you can, what it has the capacity for being. At the end of the day, it's like any problem. You have to understand where you are, where you want to be, and then figure out what are the challenges that are holding me back from getting there. So you start with where you are. which is what the LIs and the OCIs helped us do. That gave us a sense of what were some of our cultural strengths, not just as an organization, but that's where the OCI came in. The LI helped us get a sense of what were the strengths and challenges, opportunities for each of the leaders that we had. So we did LIs on all of the executives from the CEO, myself on down. We did LIs on all the doctors, all the key leaders in the organization. We did management impact assessments on all of the office managers and all of the supervisor level managers. That gave us a sense of current state. Then obviously we spent a lot of time as a leadership group talking about our vision. Where are we going? Why are we going there? What's the blue water vision? What's the vision of how we really look at the world? We had a choice to either be firefighters. The company was on fire. We could just start spraying water on that fire to try to put the fire out. Or we could think back to, well, what's the root cause of the fire and figure out how to prevent that root cause. Kevin took this to another level. He came back and said, hey, we don't just want to be firefighters or fire prevention consultants. We want to be visionaries. We've got a forest fire going on. We want to picture what would the ecosystem of the future look like. And then, yeah, we'll get the fire out. We'll figure out how to prevent the fire, but we want to build toward what we want that forest to look like in the future. What do we want the garden to look like in the future? That was the vision. The vision was very important. Then we sat down and we asked ourselves, what's holding us back? What are the challenges, the things we need to figure out how to solve to get from the cultural issues we have to that vision? And then we took each challenge and we assigned a challenge owner to it. So we knew we had a clinical excellence challenge. Well, we had Dr. Mark Adams. He was the doctor that was assigned to achieve the clinical excellence goals. We had operational excellence challenges. We had a COO that owned the operational challenges. A metaphor we used was like success is like a Maserati or a Ferrari. The clinical excellence, the functional excellence. If you're an engineering company, you've got to be technically excellent. That excellence is the engine of the Ferrari. The operational excellence is like the pistons in the Ferrari. But you can have a Ferrari engine that's well tuned, but if it runs out of motor oil, it ain't going anywhere. And it's the motor oil that was the cultural excellence. So my job, I was the lubricant. I was the guy that was in charge of lubricating the pieces that were going out. And then we had the chief commercial officer, Todd DeYoung, who was responsible for getting marketing leads into the pipeline and moving them through the pipeline. And then my role also played at the bottom of the pipeline. So my challenge was, how do we create a sales model, a patient interaction model that allowed our doctors and our salespeople to have interactions with our patients in ways that achieve the same goals externally that we were trying to achieve with our leadership internally.
So it sounds like kind of a best case scenario on leadership alignment within an organization that kind of at least at that point in time really got culture, embraced its importance through different levels, multiple layers of the business, and understood its link to performance. Michael, would it be safe to say not every organization is like that?
Right. So yeah, I think that having the leaders recognize their impact on all the way down through the organization and ultimately on the culture is something that is really critical and Andy helped us with that, just as he did with ClearChoice. He and Human Synergistics created a profile of this is to show our leadership team this is the impact that you're having on the organization. And the other part of it was that with the Human Synergistics tool, it allowed us to show the leaders the impact that they wanted to have. And that profile that they had, and we looked at our leadership team as a composite. So this is the composite profile of what our leadership looks like. And this is what you want, the impact you want to have. This is the culture you want to have. And those things very often are very different. They were different for us. And closing that gap was something that our leaders became motivated to do. And as they did that, they impacted the culture in a more positive way and the people that were working for them realized that these were new behaviors that they needed to model. So throughout the organization, that ultimately is how change can be affected. In addition, the modeling behaviors from the leaders is a critical component. Then the structures, the changes within the organization that you make to the structure of the organization is the other part too.
That's great. So another follow-up question from Jody Beeler. As a follow-up, what goals were established for leaders to perform against to ensure a healthy culture? And I'm assuming that one's going back to the clear choice structure. Like, yeah, great question. Were there KPIs in place, OKRs? Like, how did you think about setting those goals? And I'm curious if they were, were those goals linked to their compensation, all that good stuff.
Yeah, good questions. And let me unpack those a little bit. First of all, we used the Intel OKR system to set strategic goals, big, hairy, audacious goals, break them down into 3-year, 1-year goals, break those down into annual, quarterly objectives. We had clinical objectives, operational, cultural objectives, commercial objectives. So we created a balanced scorecard with using the objectives and key results system that Intel developed. And within that system, one of the things that I developed to support attention to each of those areas, clinical, operational, cultural, and commercial objectives, was what we call the Mastery Path program. And the Mastery Path program was, if anybody's ever been a Boy Scout, you come in, you're working as a tenderfoot, then you get to second class, first class, is Life Scout, Eagle Scout. That was the Mastery Path program. We had one for doctors, where the doctors could go from associate to fellow to mentor to clinical director. We had one for key roles, our support organizations in the field. We had them for our salespeople. So we had kind of the green belt, brown belt, black belt, Six Sigma type leveling up programs that we use to provide motivation, both intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation for achieving the goals. Now, what did you get if you moved from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4? Well, you got increases in salary, you got bonuses. At the highest levels, the doctors got equity in their practices, equity in the company. We've worked with another company on this that's similar, that is providing trips, like President's Club trips for hitting certain levels. But in order to achieve those levels, one of the critical metrics that you had to hit was, at ClearChoice, there was an LI metric. You needed to get to a certain percentile in your average blue ink LI composite. So they needed to hit a minimum 75 percentile in their blue ink scales, the 4 blue ink scales. That was an average, so you didn't have to do that with every scale. In other organizations, we've supplemented that with an average NPS measure, or ENPS, employee NPS, Net Promoter Score measure. I know that measures more of the climate rather than just as Lori was pointing out, Lori Harris on the chat, we had employee engagement surveys as well, and we tasked folks, in order to move to the next level, to hit certain levels of engagement. So engagement, climate, culture, we're trying to work each of those different levels. And so in addition, we gave them certain interventions that they had to participate in, courses they had to attend. This is going to sound strange, but we actually put video cameras in each of the consult rooms, and participants would have to make videos that we couldn't see them. It wasn't Big Brother. The patients would sign off on it was okay to be recorded. But what we used the videos for was to help the doctors learn to engage with the customers more effectively. So we were using, if you're familiar with Professor Kirkpatrick at University of Arizona, we were using his 4 levels of measurement to measure, are people coming to the courses? Are they passing the tests?
Yep.
Are they using the best practices on the job in their practices? And are they getting the results? Are they hitting the clinical, operational, cultural, and commercial metrics that we've set for them? So there were multiple levels of measurement. But in my mind, that's really the only way you can create consistency, is you have to measure from level 1 to level 4. You've got to dashboard it. You've got to put it out there. You've got to make the data available so that people can see, are they making progress? And then you've got to reward them both extrinsically and intrinsically. It's not enough to give them money. You have to give them, one of the most exciting things we did is we would give away badges, we'd give away prizes at our annual meetings to the doctors and the salespeople and other people that were at annual meetings. And those were by far the most motivating. Recognition was far more motivating than actually the money that we gave anybody.
That's terrific. So when you're a true master of culture, you have multiple badges, and then they give you a bandage for your nose,
That's
right?
right, and a mustache, and a
Yeah.
mustache. Yeah, but you get different colors of mustaches as you move to different levels.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, it dawns on me that, and I want to actually go back to the questions. By the way, guys, please do add questions, either just in the chat function. The Q&A function is also working. They kind of do similar things. So whoever you want to ask it, please do add those questions. Um, Another
Let
thing
me,
I want to
I'll
bring
just
up.
add, actually, Rich, to what Andy was talking about. We in my organization, at the same organization where Andy came in, we published all the results that we were having in terms of culture change and different aspects that we were addressing. But as a leadership team, we also with Andy, created values for our team. That was one of the things that we had, and held each other accountable to those values. So at a much kind of simpler level, maybe, we were creating the expectations for the team, and then we would model those for the rest of the organization. So we started off every meeting with the values that Andy had helped us develop when we were working with him. And then part of that was then on an ongoing basis, holding each other accountable to living those values.
Great.
And Michael, if I could just build on that and say, I remember that very well. And one of the things we talked about when we were developing those values was the values weren't as important as the conversations you were having as you were developing the values. And it really doesn't matter what words come out and go up on the wall. It just doesn't. Collins and Porras showed that in Built to Last and In Search of Excellence. And it doesn't matter what the words are. What matters is the conversations people have and their understanding of the words. And so holding each other accountable is holding each other accountable to the mutual understanding that we developed in that conversation where we were coming up with the values and the vision and the purpose.
Well, it says something, Andy, that this was, I think, about 18 years ago, and we hadn't seen each other until just a few weeks ago. Since then, but I remember so distinctly that process that we went through, those conversations that we had. It's very vivid for me, and the impact. So obviously the impact was profound, really, and it really impacted the company as well.
Well, I think one of the things I remember us talking about was culture is really the sum of the conversations that you're having in the organization. What are you talking about? How frequently are you talking about it? You get what you measure, but you also get what you talk about. And if you're constantly talking about the values, if you're bringing the values into every major decision, that creates culture. If you're bringing the purpose and the vision into your strategic planning over and over and over again, it's those conversations that create culture. It's not the words on the wall.
I wanted to highlight some story that Tom Kennedy's talking about in the webinar chat. Says our cultural journey started in 2002. The focus is on turning an organization around. The driving forces are our five guiding principles and the irrefutable laws of industrial distribution. These became the foundation for hiring of all levels of leadership development. In 2002, this industrial distributor was struggling as a $300 million business. Today, we're at 2.5 billion. All is due to a focus on these cultural foundations. So, a lot of that's a great example. Tom, expect us to be reaching out, perhaps in a future one of these conversations, so we can have you tell your story and some of the like practical lessons you've learned. As I turn to the poll, it looks like kind of by a fairly wide margin right now, the most challenging part of driving cultural change, something we haven't really talked about, and it speaks to Tom's, a journey that started in 2002 and now that's 2025, how much change has happened. People are really concerned about how do you sustain positive change over time. So um, also a consultant, and I know that I could go in and drive change in how, companies that I work with handle their marketing and how they do their employer brands. And but sustaining that change is that's a different, it's a tricky wicket. So Michael, maybe if you want to talk about, some of the challenges you face there, and if you have any tips for like how do you keep the momentum?
Yeah, and that was going to be my guess. It's interesting, but not surprising that that came out as, I guess, the number one issue that we're facing. And I think there's many reasons and different circumstances, I think, make that more of an issue. Certainly changes in leadership. There's frequent changes in leadership, especially among certain companies, industries. And when that happens, it's hard to kind of keep things on track for where you want to be, where you're going, the progress that you've made. So I guess I would say that, well, first of all, I would, any change that you're bringing, you're starting, don't treat it as a project or initiative that's kind of isolated to an event. The 2025 Culture Initiative, it's something that should be integrated into your business, and at every level, as Andy's described, and I've worked with in the different levels that you need to address. So treat it as something that's going to be an ongoing part of the business. Have a vision for what you are going to be doing over years, and how you're going to be doing it. So not just in the short term, but set it up so that it's something that if you're measuring the culture, it's not a one-time event. It's something that you're going to come back to. You're going to engage in conversations, not just now, but in the future, next year, the year after. So those things need to be kind of thought of as something that's now a part of the business of how we work, addressing our culture, addressing our leadership. So that would be one of the ththings I would say.
Great. Got a nice comment from Lori Harris, who's had a who's had a lot of great things to share with the group. One thing I wanted to highlight is we're going to try to continue to do these types of conversations. The next time we will, this is currently a Zoom webinar, which manages our chat and questions in a certain way. Ideally, the next one will be a meeting where you'll be able to raise your hand and ask a question yourself. That's what we're trying to develop. This first one,
Continuous improvement, Richard.
continuous improvement is what we're going for. But I've been particularly excited to see the really thoughtful, comments of this crowd. As Andy really was talking about, wants to, continue to try to build a community of practice. So thank you all for participating in that. But Lori said we focus on encouraging responsibility and coaching ideal behaviors, removing density by getting curious about the opposites of reds and greens. Research shows us that accountability often nurtures passive defensive behaviors. The shift can be accelerated with a mindset of responsibility. Michael, thoughts on the mindset of responsibility and how that sort of impacts these efforts?
I'm sorry, could you describe the mindset of responsibility?
Yeah, on the how can we make sure that leaders are accountable for these cultural changes?
Yeah, it's um, I think it's in different ways. As I mentioned, it's something that we did as a leadership team that Andy helped us do, to hold each other accountable. I think sometimes the CEO or the leader ultimately is going to set the tone for whether we're going to uphold the behaviors that we're committing to, and that we want for the organization. And sometimes when those aren't practiced, it means that people within the organization have to leave the organization, and sometimes it takes making changes to make a statement that certain things are necessary for the organization. Certain things won't be, I guess, tolerated or accepted by the organization. So,
Or in the case of Tom
hard thing.
Kennedy's company, as he's saying, his CEO is unrelenting in his commitment, even to the point of body checking his own teammates to drive home the commitment. So I don't
Body
recommend
checking
doing
optional.
that.
That
But
may drive just a little bit too much red ink into the 9 o'clock if we're body checking.
exactly. Exactly. Well, we are coming up on the end of the hour. Andy, I want to give you a chance to maybe wrap up a little bit on your thoughts on this topic, and particularly again the link between leadership, culture, and performance.
Yeah. If I can share my screen here for just a second, let me see if this might be useful. One of the things as we talk about sustaining any kind of culture change effort, everything Michael was talking about, absolutely right on. We need clear vision, clear values, clear purpose. We need to be able to be speaking the same language. We need to have clear definitions for things like responsibility and accountability and understanding what those mean. What do races mean? All of those things are important. One of the things that we found was that you can do all of these things and you still won't see the perfect culture, or you'll see culture kind of improve and decay and improve and decay. Ultimately, there is no magic wand to drive culture. All of these things we talk about are necessary but not sufficient. There's no way that we can actually guarantee an improved culture, but we can increase our probability of success. And I think that's one of the mindsets that we found with creating a sustainable, great culture was if you can make choices to iteratively, incrementally improve the probability of success that your culture will sustain and grow, survive and thrive, then you will see a net growth in the culture. And there were 4 areas that at Clear Choice we focused on sustaining and growing, that we focused on as the linchpins of culture, if you will. It starts with hiring, because I'll tell you this, you can solve a lot of problems downstream if you hire the right people. And boy, you can create a lot of problems if you hire the wrong people. If you hire people that are passionate, that are high functioning, that are empathetic, it's hard to teach somebody empathetic listening if they have no empathy. Let me put it that way. So having a set of traits that are driven by the 11-2 o'clock, by the blue ink, what I call the 4 noble passions, being able to hire to some of those traits is the first step. So we want to make sure our recruiters continue over the long term to be hiring to these identified traits. Once we hire them, putting them through onboarding where we talk about the vision, the purpose, and values, as Michael was saying. We got to get them inculcated into the culture earlier. Once we've onboarded them, we need to continue to coach them in the skills and the mindsets required for the culture. We need to some kind of motivational program to inspire them to continue to care about culture. And then finally, as I mentioned, it's all about the leadership. We need to train the leaders to be the exemplars of culture, to recognize it, reward it when they see it, and to be ultimately to be culture champions, because the leaders cast the widest shadow. So there's that.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Michael. It's been a great conversation. We will be reaching out with a recording of this conversation. We hope to draw you all into further conversations. I've gotten a ton of value from your comments and really appreciate all the interactive involvement from the crowd. Andy and Michael, thank you for the great stories and the valuable wisdom. And we will be in touch. Obviously, a lot of the tools that were used in creating this cultural transformation that Andy and Michael were talking about come from Human Synergistics. When this webinar closes, you'll be kicked out to the Human Synergistics website to reach out. We'll also be following up with all the information from this recording, and we'll get in touch on when we're doing this again. Look forward to talking to you all further. Anything else to add, Michael?
No, thank you. Thanks, everyone. It was great conversation.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Michael. Great
Thank
working with
so
you, and
much,
great
guys.
thank you to the audience.
Oh yeah, thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.